AFR Talk.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, you can be among the first every morning to find out what today's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Glad to have you in the conversation today. I went over this yesterday, but I want to play some more sound bites that have to do with this whole drone issue because this is still circulating. And I actually part company with a lot of my conservative friends on this issue because I believe that the drone policy that is in place is a good one. Because I believe that any American citizen who puts on the uniform of our enemies and works to destroy us has forfeited whatever protection he wants to claim by virtue of his citizenship. He becomes an enemy combatant. And I used the analogy yesterday. If we had an American citizen, made a point of going to Germany, putting on the outfit of the German army, taking an oath to Adolf Hitler, putting on one of those funny little helmets and jumping in a tank and trying to use that tank to destroy American forces, I would say we could take him out with no problem. And his citizenship, he's forfeited whatever claim he would make to being protected from that by becoming an enemy combatant, by becoming an enemy of his own land and his own people. And here is Charles Krauthammer essentially agreeing with what I said yesterday. Let's listen.
I really don't understand this sort of hysteria over the idea of killing Americans who have taken up arms against the United States. Thousands of Americans, Southerners, died in Antietam without any due process. When we stormed the beaches of Normandy on D-Day and Americans approached a German bunker, I don't think anybody asked, is there a German American here? I want to read you the Miranda Rights. If you take up arms against the United States under the sainted Lincoln, you are a target because it was an act of war, and you forfeited those rights.
So Krauthammer is saying, look, you engaged in an act of war against the United States. You have forfeited whatever rights or protection you could claim because you were an American citizen. So, the left is kind of apoplectic. Judge Napolitano on Fox News fancies himself an expert on the Constitution. He's apoplectic. No foundation in the Constitution for this. And I simply disagree with Judge Napolitano. I think this is perfectly constitutional. We have declared war on al-Qaeda and their affiliates. And we have the Constitution gives Congress the right, and only Congress the right, to declare war. But they've done that, authorized military action against al-Qaeda. And it is the president who is the commander-in-chief. You have one commander-in-chief, and only Congress can pull the trigger on authorizing military action. But then once it does, it is the responsibility of the president to prosecute that war effort. I have no problem with the use of drones to take out American citizens overseas. We're not talking about on our own soil, but Americans overseas who are joining forces with al-Qaeda in an effort to destroy us. Got no problem with them being taken out on the field of battle. Now here's David Korn. This guy's a winger left, writes for a magazine called Mother Jones. This guy is as far left as you can get, and wow, it turns out that he might even agree with us and President Obama on the use of drones. Let's listen.
I think if you find someone who is operationally involved in terrorist activity or a terrorist group that is indeed active and has the ability to strike the United States, yes.
So he's had no problem. They're traitors. They've taken up arms against the United States. They can be taken out. Now, Ed Henry, Fox News, actually confronted Jay Carney because Jay Carney was very evasive because the reality is that civilians have been killed by these drone strikes. We talked yesterday, some investigation indicated that maybe 176 children in Pakistan have been killed by these drone strikes because these cowardly Taliban and al-Qaeda types, they try to shield themselves with children in the hopes that we'll see the children and we won't strike. It's cowardly on their part. They're the ones that are putting children in harm's way. They may have other innocent civilians, whether it's members of their immediate or extended family, that are staying with them in their compound or in their house. They're the ones that are putting these innocent civilians in harm's way. Their blood is not on us. The blood is on the heads and on the hands of those Muslims who would put innocent people in harm's way. And here's Ed Henry and Jay Carney kind of trying to dance around this issue of whether civilians have died in these drone strikes. And now the reality is there's no question that civilians have died in these drone strikes. And again, What the left wants to do is put the blame for these civilian deaths on the United States and on these drones. That's not where the moral culpability lies. It lies in the hands of those who would expose their loved ones, their children, members of their immediate family, would expose them to lethal force. That makes them cowards, and the blood of those civilian deaths is on their hands, not on the United States of America. And here's Ed Henry trying to pin Jay Carney down on this.
Why are you dancing around the question of whether or not we kill civilians? Why can't the government at least admit that civilians
I don't
have been
think
killed?
that I'm dancing around it. I didn't dispute
I'm
it.
not necessarily
Well, I'm just not
disputing
going to, what I can't do or what I'm
civilians
not,
have been killed, right?
I don't disagree with that.
So Jay Carney finally says, I don't disagree with your statement that civilians have been killed. And see, that's why it's important to think with moral clarity here, because we think that innocent civilians, they're not combatants. They're not trying to destroy the United States. They're just married to people that are, or they're the children of people that are, or they're in the family of people that are, and we think they've died. They're innocent civilians. They didn't do anything to deserve them. We think that's absolutely terrible, and of course it is. It's terrible. It's horrible. Nobody celebrates that. Nobody likes that. Nobody wants that. But then you have to ask the question, okay, if innocent civilians have died here, whose fault is that? Who is to be held accountable for that? It's not the United States. We're attacking because we need to defeat our enemies. If our enemies are the ones that are going to expose these civilians to our lethal force, then the bloodshed of the innocents lies on their heads and on their hands, not on ours. Now, here's Kirsten Powers. She is a Democrat strategist. Number to call if you want to join the program, by the way, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. And Kirsten Powers, the left now is starting to go after Obama on this. I said, look, they're going to turn on Obama. They can't help him get reelected anymore. So sort of the gloves are going to start to come off, because if President Obama starts to do things like these drone attacks, this violates everything that liberals claim to stand for. They're eventually going to start to come after him. And here's Kirsten Powers, Democrat strategist, and she's actually more critical of President Obama on this drone issue than George Bush. Let's listen.
You heard Jay Carney. These drones kill far fewer people than a war would, or any sort of ground invasion. Is that adequate justification for using them?
Yeah, I guess this is the I'm not as bad as Bush argument, even though Obama actually has turned out to be a lot worse when it comes to the war on terror issues.
So he says, look, President Obama's actually turned out to be worse than Bush on the war on terror issues with all of these drone strikes. So that's what's going on the drone strike front. The founder of the Ground Zero Mosque, by the way, Faisal Abdul Rauf, he's now being sued for $3 million. The accusation is that there were $3 million that was given to the mosque to build that thing, and he pocketed the money and spent it on lavish trips, luxury sports cars, and personal real estate. Here's a story from the Washington Free Beacon, and we've been over this before, but Gitmo detainees return to the field of battle. That's what's hazardous about releasing them from Guantanamo Bay. You know, the studies have indicated, this is from U.S. intelligence agencies, that 168 terrorists out of 602 detainees who were transferred to other countries from Guantanamo Bay rejoined terrorist groups or otherwise took part in insurgent and terrorist activities. So that's better than 25%. That's verging on, that's about 30%. So there's this cry on humanitarian grounds. We got to release them. We can't prove anything. We got to let them go. And our own intelligence services are telling us that 30% of them wind up back on the battlefield, back out there trying to destroy American citizens. Number to call, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. You know, and talking about the nature of Islam, we've got a story here about the flourishing number of no-go zones for non-Muslims in Europe. They're all over the place. These are zones in Europe where non-Muslims are not allowed to go. There are places in the British cities of Birmingham. I know missionaries that are in Birmingham. That say Birmingham there. We say Birmingham. What do we say? Is it Birmingham, Alabama? We say Birmingham, right?
Ham.
It's Birmingham in England. I know missionaries that work there among Muslims. Places like Bradford, Derby, Dewsbury, Leeds, Leicester, Liverpool, Luton, Manchester, Sheffield, Waltham Forest. These are all being targeted by Muslims for blanket Sharia rule. They've got whole neighborhoods in England that have these signs at the entrance to the neighborhood. You are entering a Sharia-controlled zone. In France, there are 751 at last count no-go zones where Europeans are told stay out of here. 751 neighborhoods in France where native Frenchmen are not allowed to go. You've got the problem in Brussels. You have it in Germany. You have it in Italy. You have it in the Netherlands. There are 400 no-go zones in Holland. You've got it in Sweden, in the city of Malmö. Large swaths of that southern city are no-go zones for non-Muslims. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to Jerry, Sherman, Texas. Jerry, you're on Focal Point. What's on your mind?
Well, I wanted to make a quick comment about the Boy Scouts because Linda Harvey at Mission America sent out a request by email that people should request the 2 gay people at the primary board of directors of Boy Scouts that seem to be behind all of this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And pressuring them to resign.
Yeah, that's a good move. And we sent an action note out yesterday putting pressure on the CEO of AT&T. We just focused our attention on one CEO, the CEO of AT&T, pressuring him to resign. Anyway, your other thought?
Yes, my other thought has to do with that New York Times article last weekend about doing away with the Constitution.
Yeah.
It seems to me like this is something that we really need to spend a lot of focus on because it can change the entire political dialogue. I mean, no longer can we appeal to the authority of the Constitution if these guys win their argument.
Yeah.
And I would just love to see us, it puts us on the defensive again. I would love to see us put them on the defensive for their ideology for a change.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate the call, Jerry. Thank you for that. And, you know, there is a movement, a law professor at Georgetown University School of Law. He's saying we ought to just get rid of the Constitution. It's outdated. It's outmoded. We got no use for it. Same thing that people say about the Bible. Focal Point AFR Talk.